Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session. I'm Mădălina Iamandei. I'm a patient ambassador, and it's truly a pleasure to be with you today, especially given that my journey with HeFH Europe is quite recent. We only started this work together, from my side at least, earlier this year. We wanted to speak today about policymaking. What is the process a bit to demystify the various institutions? What is their role? How we engage with them? What are some tricks and tips on, being successful in these engagements? And for that, I am pleased to welcome on the stage our panel. We have Kitti Almer with us, who is part of the HeFH Europe team. We have Professor Florian Kronenberg, who is the chair on LP Little A International Task Force. Also, we have Dr. Marius Jantă, coming from Romania. He is the president and co-founder of INOMED in Romania. And also online, we should have with us Professor Zamfina Ademi, who is the head of Health Economics and Policy Evaluation Research at Monash University in Australia. Just to set the scene before we move into our panel discussion, since I am a public affairs expert, I manage coalitions for a living on a day-to-day basis. And I've also been part of the European Parliament. I was working in a team for one of the Romanian MEPs a couple of years ago. I wanted to briefly summarize or illustrate who does what. So first of all, we have the engine of any legislation that goes in the European Union, and that is the Commission, the European Commission. They're the one to initiate, to do the research, to put together a proposal for legislation. And it's important to note, I think you've heard that a million times if you've worked with institutions, that health, it's not an EU competency. That stays, the decisions made on health stay at national level. So it's the governments, our national governments, that have the power to maybe look at the strategies proposed by European bodies, but they are the ones to issue and legiferate and implement anything that has to do with health, including budgets. Then I think it's important to also remember that within the Commission, we have DG Sante. They are the ones to do all the work in health. And as you have heard, there will be a plan on cardiovascular diseases. That is the job of DG Sante, basically, and it's now being developed. Then we will hear, or we have heard about the Council conclusion, and Kitti will tell us more about that. Here we are talking about the Council of the European Union. This is the governments of the 27 countries, and they come together and they align on priorities. And they also develop these conclusions that are not legally binding, but it's truly a recognition of issues and matters that are relevant and need national action and support. So that's a very positive sign that we now have some action on cardiovascular diseases. And then perhaps we can move towards the Parliament and see what is their role. The Parliament, it's actually, the one body where we have a direct say, who we send there. We do vote in European elections, and we choose our MEPs. And it's important to know that they are the ones to have a final say, actually, on legislation. They vote, they bring amendments, they discuss, they debate. And I think a good example is from another health area, which is oncology, where apart from the Commission's Europe's Beating Cancer Plan, there was a dedicated committee, because Parliament works through committees, to discuss oncology and to discuss a plan for Europe. And now the positive sign is that we have a SANT committee. That is a very new development. health as it was in the past years was covered by an ENVI committee that was looking at environment and other areas, but now health has become truly, truly important and has a dedicated committee. And you have probably heard MEP Jerković mentioning there is an intergroup on cardiovascular. What is that? So MEPs are free to form groups like this, which are not too formal, they're informal discussions to align on health matters or a specific health priority, as we see with cardiovascular health. This is it in brief, or not so brief, what each institution does. It's important to have that background as you are building your strategies for engagement, as you are building your advocacy plans, because as I mentioned, it's very important to align timing with the right person, with the right message. And this is what we are going to discuss with the panel today. How do we merge these three big items so that we get the results that we are aiming for? And for that, I will start with Kitti, and I will take a seat as well, since my role here, it's a bit, okay, let's move. And I have this for you to move the slides. Perhaps we can also, Kitti, before we move into your discussion, and as you will be explaining a couple of topics, we do have a Slido, so we are curious to see how many of you have already interacted with politicians, and we will interpret the results as we are progressing through the panel. So, Kitti, let's begin with the policy side. You have worked both as a health attaché for the Hungarian government, and now you are leading the work in advocacy for HeFH Europe. And basically, you've seen it from both sides now, no? When it comes to health, what is the real difference that Brussels can make, and where Brussels can decide, and what is the local governments can do?
Thank you, Mădălina, and thank you also for the question. And hi, everyone. Very nice to see all of you, and very much welcome to Zagreb as well. It's also one of my favorite cities here. About policy, as you have already laid out, health is a member state competence. So it is indeed a very good question, what can Brussels do, and what is it that the member states are supposed to do? What we need to understand is, according to the treaties of the European Union, it's very limited what the European Union can actually do with health that are actually focusing on those areas as internal market. What do I mean about that? For example, medical devices, pharmaceuticals. It's also the second one, that is data. How do we control actually patient data? And then there it comes to public health, that is policy, and that is limited what Brussels can actually, well, I wouldn't say force onto member states, but what they can actually do, they can recommend. So for example, just to give you a couple of examples of dossiers that are actually on the table right now in Brussels. One of them is the European Health Data Space that is going to be coming in 2026, that was adopted 2025 March and is planned to be rolling out until 2030. That is going to be enforced on member states. Member states will have to implement what Brussels is actually asking them. Also, when it comes to medical devices or pharmaceuticals, a new pharma package is going to come now. The trilogues are ongoing. Hopefully they are going to be closed by the end of this year, but if not, the new presidency, the Cypriots, are going to be taking it over and close it then. Same, as we have already mentioned, a big event is going to come on the 16th of December, circle it in red, because that's when the cardiovascular health plan is going to be announced from the Commission. It's going to be in the form of a Commission communication. It's going to be a set of recommendations and pillars and flagship initiatives that the member states are recommended to do. But again, since it's a member state competence, Brussels cannot force a member state to have a screening program. That is actually up to the member state to decide, and that's where you come in. Because you are the locals, you are the ones who actually have access to your governments, and you can ask, you have agreed to something, you are asked to do something, what's your plan of rollout, how we can help it, what I can add to this. And this is my favorite piece of document I'm putting it here so many times by now that I should know it by heart. This is the Council conclusions that was already mentioned by Mădălina. This is also a policy document that was done by Brussels, and I'm putting it in quotation marks, because it was agreed by all member states. It was prepared by the Hungarian presidency, and it was agreed by all other 26 member states who were negotiating it. This means that everything that stands here, and on page 20, if I'm not mistaken, the invitations to the member states are clearly listed. What needs to be done on a local level and on their own member state level. This is for their accountability, and you are the ones who can actually make them accountable for what they agreed to and how they are going to roll this out. So in short, it depends which area we are talking about, but policy and what needs to be done on cardiovascular health, that is not forcible.
Definitely. And since you anticipated a bit my next question, which had to do with what can we do at national level, how can we convince our authorities and our governments to take action, maybe you can illustrate briefly how did HeFH Europe Foundation contributed to the cardiovascular plan that it's being developed by the Commission, because this is a very good example of advocacy in action in a way. How do we respond to such call for contributions? I think what made a huge difference was the fact that there was a coordinated response as HeFH Europe, as well as our own ambassadors, advocates' responses. It was like a flood of information towards the Commission. You cannot ignore us. Can you explain a bit more how that process went?
Okay, so first actually on how to actually approach a politician, that's going to be the workshop that we are going to have this afternoon. And I'm not spoiling too much about it, but those of you who are unable to join my workshop, basically what matters is be precise. When you're approaching a politician, usually they do not have the time to have lengthy conversations about a problem. And if you are explaining a problem, please always have a solution in your pockets. Everyone can complain. Few have a solution, actually, that can help. About HeFH Europe's foundation's work for policy. It was a very exciting time during August and September when the evidence, when calling for evidence was actually open for the cardiovascular health plan. This meant that everyone from around the world, even people from Mexico and Morocco, were taking into their comments. Apparently they care about European healthcare, which is fantastic. HeFH Europe had a very coordinated approach to this. This is something that, I don't know, even more than 50 answers from the HeFH Europe and HeFH Europe affiliates and ambassadors were posted for that. And after this, it was DJ Sante who was going through that. Oh, I wouldn't have been DJ Sante at that point. That was a lot of response that they had to go through. And those responses need to be selected, what needs to be included in this. Actually, this Commission communication is going to be a few-page document. It's going to be even less than the Council conclusions. 4, 5 max pages, that's what I'm envisioning right now, but we are going to see that in December. But that was not enough to just call for evidence and give evidence. We had the pleasure of meeting the Commissioner. We are very lucky with the Commissioner at the moment because, first of all, I know that everyone had maybe misconceptions about the Hungarian Commissioner coming into work, but I can assure you he is extremely dedicated to this cause. He was, even before these conclusions were adopted 2024, December 3, he already committed himself to a new strategy on cardiovascular health, and I must highlight that's huge. Before that, only one other action plan was so dedicated to a very specific disease, and that was the Beating Cancer Plan. And when we came up with the cardiovascular health plan, side note, I actually wanted to call it the Beating Heart Action Plan, but the Commission didn't like it. That was the point when we could actually see that Oliver Várhelyi, Commissioner, is actually extremely dedicated to this point, and he is going to deliver. But on the December 16th, it's not going to be the only thing that is going to come out. It's going to be a huge package. The first part of the Biomedical Act is coming out on the same day, and also the revision of the Medical Devices Regulation. And we are affected by all of those, spoiler alert. So we do need to get into those documents as well. That's all on my side. Thank you.
That's very useful already. Thank you very much, Kitti. I think that the takeaway here is that we need to be precise, to have a structure, to our message, and timing makes all the difference, doesn't it? Thank you for that. Now we are moving into discussing the science that can drive the momentum. So I'm looking at you, Professor Kronenberg. You've called the journey on LP-A research a Sisyphean cycle, haven't you? Why has it been so hard to translate so many decades of evidence into implementation? Maybe you can walk us through that.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to welcome the entire family here, because we are a family working together, fighting for something. And I think that's really important, that nobody here in the room is alone. Yeah. I call this a Sisyphean cycle because I learned in school ancient Greek, and the Greek methodology shows us this picture here, and it shows us that Sisyphus had to roll up a big rock to the top of the mountain. He was condemned by the gods to do that, and before he came to the top of the mountain, the rock is rolling down again into the valley, and he had to do it once over again, and again. And I had sometimes the impression that we are in a very similar situation, but I'm very hoping that we can really break this Sisyphean cycle when we stand together. So I can tell you a little bit the journey, what has to be done if we want to bring something like LP, like FH, into the cardiovascular arena. And this is a long journey, and we usually start with evidence generation. We are in the lab, we are doing lab work, we are working with patients, and then we have a lot of evidence, and when we have enough evidence, then we can try to convince an organization to write up a guideline. And you might believe when you have written a guideline that the guideline is followed. No, nobody cares about that. Maybe some people care about that. Now the really hard work is starting, the guideline implementation. And this is the Sisyphean work we have to do. And it takes usually, when you have a guideline in place, it takes usually 17 years that it becomes common practice. And I hope we can shorten the time, that we can break the Sisyphean cycle. So it's a long journey to come from cardiovascular disease, come to cardiovascular health. And I can tell you, when we wrote in 1994 the first reviews about LP, we have already preached what is now be seen in the guideline. So it's already a long journey, started a long time ago. And I raised the question, can we afford to waste further decades and lose thousands of lives when we do not really push the implementation faster? So that's, I think, a really important issue. And, you know, the situation was when we had the LP summit in Brussels, it was a very important event for us because we had something which I have never experienced in 35 years of science, that we brought together very important groups of people. So first, we had the key opinion leaders who were making the science, and for example, we brought in Professor Zamfina Ademi. She prepared us a very good argument for the cost-effectiveness analysis of LP testing and management. This is really important because politicians need to know what does it cost, whether they can save costs, whether they can save life and all this stuff. Then, and I consider this extremely important, I did not understand that 30 years that we have to bring in patients with lived experience. They are the really important ones, because when they give their testimonies, then people look up to them and they realize that behind statistics and all the science, there are given persons. And these persons, they have families, they have tragedies often, and tragedies which can be avoided in many cases. So these are, in my opinion, our heroes. And they witness every day what it means if you have a disease or a condition, and they stand up for the community. And I think our ambassadors really deserve a big applause here. But then we brought in a further group of people, the members of the EU Parliament. And I'm very grateful for MEP Jerković that she made it also here. That means she has really a continuous relationship to this, and she stands up for that. And we need your advice, and this we will discuss also in the workshop, the best practice, how we should approach our policymakers, because they can help us to break the Sisyphean cycles. And we had the members of WHO, ESIS, World Heart Federation. They are developing guidelines, further guidelines. They are developing implementation strategies, and they hopefully involve those with the lived experience. Because when they get this feedback, then it can be really a successful journey. And this brings me what we have to the point what we have finally decided in Brussels, the 5 key asks. And I hope that everybody takes now the cellular phone and scans this barcode here, because here you can very easily vote for the key asks of the Brussels Declaration. And the 5 key asks as follows. LPA should be part of cardiovascular health plans in each of the member states, even outside of Europe. It's very important that you bring it into the cardiovascular health plans. Second one, policy and programs for LPA testing and management to save costs. And we will hear later from Professor Zamfina Ademi how cost effective and how cost saving it is. The third one is political leadership and commitment for systematic LPA testing with full reimbursement. In some countries, that's no big deal. In other countries, people have really to fight to get the test. It's unbelievable, yeah? And the fourth one is global cardiovascular risk assessment, including LPA. That's an important topic, and there is a movement going on in Europe now that we go away from the 10 years risk prediction, moving to the 30 years risk prediction, and hopefully also including LPA. That will be really important. And finally, raising awareness about LPA. So please be loud, go out, tell people about this issue, because this is something where we can move something. To be loud is really important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kronenberg. That gives us a truly solid scientific foundation, and I do appreciate the way you included, this policy-making aspect to it. I think we have discussed Europe and European Union, but same principle goes almost everywhere in the world. You adapt it to your local needs and to your local context. And thank you for also mentioning the economic aspect, because our next speaker is Professor Zamfina Ademi, and is she online? I'm not sure. Yeah? Okay, good. Professor Ademi, welcome. My question to you is, your analysis is showing how testing for LP(a) actually saves money. Can you walk us through what that looks like, maybe per person and at population level? Because I know you have numbers from outside Europe as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mădălina, and good morning to everyone, and good morning to the panel. Great discussion. I think Kitti started very well by saying, when you go and see politicians, give them the answers, and that's what we have. We have the answers for politicians, whether it's cost effective or not. So this journey started in 2022 with HeFH Europe. We assembled a team of scientists together with patients who were the core part of designing the study. Not many cost effectiveness studies get designed with patients being core part of it. And that's what we have done from the beginning. Patients were core part of this cost effectiveness analysis. We wanted to understand whether inclusion of lipoprotein(a) testing would improve the global cardiovascular risk. And what we've shown is that it is tremendously important to measure, first of all, lipoprotein little a to understand the burden of cardiovascular disease. You probably hear quite a lot why we should measure lipoprotein little a if we don't have new treatment. But our argument is that when you look at the burden of cardiovascular disease, Lp(a) should be included as a part of the decision making. Our analysis looked at one of the largest data set that is available in Europe, UK Biobank, where we could access data on Lp(a), and with this information we were able to show that inclusion of lipoprotein a testing as a part of decision making was very important, because if you wouldn't do lipoprotein A testing, we will not classify around 20% of population in among 10,000 individuals that we have randomly selected. So the first group is a group where we say let's continue with what is the standard of care, and then the intervention group is the group where we say what happens when we include the Lp(a) as a part of decision making. Inclusion of that reclassified individuals as a high risk, meaning that when they are reclassified, we then have the opportunity to treat their other risk factors such as high cholesterol and systolic blood pressure. Then we further looked into details of the costing. Obviously, for each government, the costing is very important part of it. So we not only included costs of testing, but also included the cost of treatment with statins, with blood pressure drugs. We included the costs of you attending hospitals, attending general practices, physicians, specialist care. But we also wanted to understand what does this mean also from a societal perspective. What happens to you when you have a heart attack? How fast would you return back to work and have a better well-being and contribute to the society? So all that information is included in here. And what we can show is that providing lipoprotein A testing, it is a cost-saving approach. Majority of the technologies that we see nowadays in our healthcare system, they tend to be cost-effective, but in this case, we have a technology, or we have a test which can provide a solution to identify individuals early, but also would be a cost saving from a healthcare perspective, but also from a societal perspective. So here are some numbers you can see here, which shows that an individual would save quite a lot of money over a lifetime if lipoprotein A testing was provided. But then when we look at the population level, if we move to the next slide, we can see that the savings at the population level are much more large, because if we look at the group of population from 40 to 69, what are the benefits for each individual countries that we have looked? So we've looked at several European countries, and then we've looked United States, Canada, and Australia, and United Kingdom outside of European Union. And we've shown a huge savings, not in millions, but in billions. So Lp(a) is a good measure which will reclassify individuals. We will detect individuals early and would provide a highly value for money for prevention of cardiovascular disease. You have to understand that majority of the health technology assessments at the moment globally work reactively rather than proactively, meaning that they will test for Lp(a) only when they have a heart attack. We don't want this. We want this technology to be available to everyone once in their lifetime. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Ademi. I think the numbers do speak for themselves in this case, especially with the last chart. It's important to see and understand how we can turn this type of evidence into momentum, and what are some of the tools to do that, because good data, it's valuable, but it's rarely enough on its own. I think we need coalition, we need to build a story, we need to communicate properly in such a way that, as Kitti mentioned, we need to be precise, we need to be clear, but in a way that speaks to those that we are engaging. Marius, what are your tips? I think one of the live moments that I've witnessed you doing that very well was in Lerești with one of the European funded projects, and the storytelling. How do you build that, and how do you engage people? How do you create the momentum to be able to have the impact that you wish for?
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you, Mădălina, for the introductions. I will actually, back in my second part of the intervention, tell you the Lerești story, a very small village in the center of Romania, where it's actually running a living lab focusing on prevention of cancer and cardiovascular diseases. But first, you mentioned the coalition, and I will start by telling you about the biggest news in Romania, my home country, this week. Was an announcement coming from the Minister of Health saying that they signed a contract with the biggest hospital in Romania to set up a center for research and the implementation of CAR-T therapies. The CAR-T therapies are a very advanced technology used in the fight against leukemia and other types of cancer, and is required to extract from the blood of a cancer patients T cells that are part of the immune system, and then to genetically modify the DNA in the respective cells in a specialized lab, and then to infuse the modified therapies inside the body of a cancer patient. So this is really personalized medicine in action, and the Romanian government signed this contract with the biggest hospital in Romania, and the funding source for this is the so-called Operational Health Program. So this is a program with exclusive funding for health, run at the national level, but are actually European money. Okay, so listening to the minister, I said, but this sounds very, very, very familiar to me. And then I went back in 2020, in the pandemic, when my group at the Center for Innovation in Medicine, we actually managed, again, during the pandemic, to build a coalition. And we published a white paper on CAR-T therapies implementation in Romania. And the third recommendation was to set up a research and implementation center in Romania using the Operational Health Program 2020. The Operational Health Program was launched in 2022. Exactly. Exactly. How was possible? And this is, on our website. Was possible because we actually managed to put together different interests of different stakeholders. And we managed to accommodate the interest of the public bodies, the Ministry of Health and Ministry of European Funds at that time. We managed to put, in addition to public, to put together the private interest, pharma companies. Of course, they're interested to have this kind of research center so close to where the CAR-T therapies will be administered. Of course, we managed to have academia with us, of course, and patients and civil society. And we acted as a platform, as an enabler, as a convener at that time, trying to put this interest all together and to have this alignment. And then we actually went out from this story, but the story moved forward. And this is very important actually to say that ideas are more important than people and stakeholders. And I was very happy actually to read in the news that what we recommended 5 years ago become now a reality. And
Congrats.
thank you. And in 2020, where a lot of was a lot of excitement around health. Was the pandemic, but was the launch of the Euro's Beating Cancer Plan, February 2020. And during the Romanian presidency of the Council 2019, we've been involved in making the cancer as a priority at European level. But at that time, I didn't know that, putting together this kind of coalition has a name called pentahelix, and this term came out actually last year during the work in the ECOS project. ECOS is aiming to establish the National Cancer Mission Hubs. And the idea is not only to involve the all pentahelix stakeholders in the governance model, but to be able to, first of all, to understand the individual interest, and then to find an alignment to a common interest. And in order to move forward and to make this actionable, is really one of the keys is to put in place the so-called distributed leadership. We are in the same room in this pentahelix framework, and we trust each other. I trust Florian, and I will not go in this in his area as LP-A researcher. And Florian trusts Mădălina, and he will respect what Mădălina has to say on patient engagement and so on. So this is basically the idea and behind this new model of governance. And this was developed in cancer, and I think this could fit very well the upcoming EU cardiovascular health plan. Then another point, the EU cardiovascular health plan is very important, as the Euro's Beating Cancer Plan and Cancer Mission are very important. But the impact, we cannot see the impact at the national level, because the implementation is very local and is very regional. And in the project you mentioned, Mădălina, what we did at the very beginning was to work with people who knows best how to understand stakeholders, interactions, and to do this mapping of the stakeholders. And we work with social scientists. We did an exercise called NetMap, and we are now in the position to understand very well for Romania what is the landscape of the stakeholders, how they interact from European, national, and local regional level in terms of coordination of funding and so on. And one of the findings, an incredible finding, was the key role of the national government, in particular Ministry of Health, in this landscape of the stakeholders. This could be good, but if in our case, cardiovascular health or prevention is not at the national level on the agenda, the Minister of Health will act as a blocker. And you should find other ways and to innovate and to see how actually what is happening at European level, at global level, can be really implemented at the local and regional level. And I think my previous example on how to use the operational health program to make an impact, I think this is a very nice way and could be other opportunities, cohesion funds and so on, to link European top priorities with spending money where the people are and where the impact is very much needed. And now, very briefly about the Living Lab. So we went in this village trying to implement European Code Against Cancer. All the recommendations for quitting smoking, all relevant for cardiovascular health as well. But in real practice, wasn't a surprise, right? Because people, of course, they might be interested in quitting smoking, but they have an immediate need on accessing care. And they have to wait 3 months for a basic ECG, and so on and so forth. And our learning was, we cannot go in silos to implement cancer prevention, and we should go there to implement prevention and to rethink the way the prevention is delivered in the 21st century. I think it's unacceptable, and this is my last point, to see, as Florian mentioned, to wait 30 years or decades, actually, from science to guidelines to the implementation. Same for FH pediatric screening, decades from WHO recommendation to become a practice. And I think the missing link between scientific evidences and real impact for the people is this implementation science piece. Action research, doing research with people and for the people, and learning by doing, and being able to extract knowledge and intelligence by implementing things, again, in real environments. So this is my point, and thank you for the opportunity once again.
Thank you very much. I think we are approaching our end of the session, but before that, we wanted to ask you some questions. And do we have the slide already? Maybe for the first one. Okay. Yes. Oh, wow. You have already taken the time to answer. So the question was, have you ever had an interaction with a policymaker? And you did it for various reasons, to raise awareness, but also for specific policy asks. So that it's very encouraging already to see that our community knows the process, and you have the courage actually to speak up to those in decision-making position. Let's see, I see it's changing because you are now seeing the the Slido. And I see a couple of answers from people who have felt too intimidated. I think that is very natural. And it's, something that, again, we learn by doing, in a way. I think that's very relevant. Go to them. You will probably say some, things that are not fully relevant, but that will give you the courage and the confidence to speak to the facts and do arm yourselves with the evidence that you have. I think that's where the boldness would stem from. Fantastic. Thank you.
Mădălina, I wanted
yes.
to interject very quickly because in this room we have an international community, and we have a community that lives with different conditions. And we put LP(a) as a case study, as an example.
Yeah.
We need to be reminded that elevated LP(a) affects 1 person in 5. So I don't want to stress anyone out, but statistically, probably today in this room in Zagreb, we will have at least 1 person with elevated LP(a) at each table, because that's our community, right? Plus maybe an additional condition, FH, because we know that you can have both LP(a) and FH. You can have LP(a) high and HoFH. The same goes for FCS. But I think what is important is to demonstrate a case study, an example, how communities work together with scientists. And when I say scientists, not only medical scientists, but also health economists. Professor Zanfina is a scientist. We work together with her to have evidence. And I think it's important that we make this relevant for everyone in this room. It doesn't matter if you are 20, 15, or 40 or more. It doesn't matter if you are from Romania, Spain, or China, or Australia. I think it's a model. It's important for all of us to start thinking and be inspired to say, okay, how does my country work? How can I use this example as an FCS patient to advocate for FCS? How can I use this to advocate for dyslipidemias? So I just wanted to make sure that everyone in this room appreciates that even though it's LP(a), and even though it is maybe focusing on Europe, the data, the declarations are international. And those are examples to be inspired.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mădălina, for that clarification. And I see Professor Kronenberg wanting to intervene. Perhaps we can pull up the next slide, which has to do with how we as FH Europe can help you. And Professor Kronenberg.
Yeah, I think we took, for example, LP(a) as an example. And you know that I'm LPLA addicted, yeah, but I would never like to see LPLA in isolation. When a patient is calling me about his LPLA level, they're always wondering why I'm asking so many questions. Yeah? I'm interested in the LDL of the people, I'm interested in the blood pressure, I'm interested in diabetes and all this stuff. All the common risk factors, because there we recognize already the target, how we can fight the situation in these cases. So please don't focus only on one condition, see always the person, and this is precision medicine.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that clarification as well. Now, how can we help you in your work at national level? Any ideas from the panel until we gather more information? One tip from maybe one of you on how to best support advocacy efforts at national level for organizations like ours?
So maybe to continue my previous intervention, not to stay at the national level, but to look at the regional level, and would be in all of the countries an opportunity actually to influence these smart specialization strategies for each of the EU regions. And we'll have actually the chance to influence this, the prioritization of this smart specialization strategy, and funding will follow.
Definitely. And Kitti?
What's also very important is to understand what's going on, because timing, and I cannot stress it enough how important timing it is when it comes to your advocacy. For example, if you see that the presidency is prioritizing cardiovascular health, as it was in our example, I don't think that's the best time to call on the attachés, for example, to say, hey, but what about cancer? Because actually we just had the cancer initiative and the whole rolling out of the action plan. There is still pieces missing from that. The tobacco product revision is also still missing. We had to finish, for example, the recommendations on smoke-free environment. So that was still unfinished, but it's bad timing. You need to understand what's going on, for example, with the Cypriot presidency coming up now. What are their priorities? And is it fitting your expectations? Is it something where you can actually intervene? Same goes on a national level. Where does your country stand right now? Again, I can only coming back to my own country because that's the best example I can give right now. We are before elections. That's the worst time to actually go to a government because they are not going to go for that. They have already prioritized what they want to do in their campaign. And if it's not LPLA, then it's going to be something else. It's going to be about pensions, retirement, young people, families, and so on. But it's not going to be about LPLA at that point. So timing is everything.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Looking at the results, I see that our community would value training and capacity building as a top priority. So we are making notes for that. And I think, apart from the ambassadors program, which is great support for us to engage with policymakers. There are dedicated webinars on this, right, and workshops. So there is a basis in place. And then advocacy and policy toolkits, I do see a lot of value in those to enable us to speak on one language, one voice, make sure that we are asking for the same things and our expectations are not conflicting. With that, I think Professor Ademi would like to also say a few words.
Thanks, Mădălina. I just wanted to highlight, I returned from a conference, International Society of Pharmacoeconomics, where all the guidelines and decisions about different treatments, testing, comes out, and one of the pillars of the conference was engagement of patients at the early stage of early clinical trials as well, because currently we don't have patients as a part of clinical trials to be part of the decision what kind of outcomes we should collect. So with this in mind, I just want to encourage everyone in the room that be vigilant, that there will be so many new changes coming out and opportunities for people to engage from the early stages of science and also at the health technology assessment process, where your voice should be heard from clinical trials to the decision-making process where the reimbursement process takes place. Thank you.
That is a fantastic action point for all of us and something to watch and be vigilant to in the future. And with that, I would like to thank our speakers. Thank you for being with us. And I'm very, very sure that together we can turn all this knowledge into impact as a community, as an association, as an organization.